Your body does something bizarre every single night around 3 a.m. Your liver suddenly releases a burst of glucose into your bloodstream even though you haven't eaten in hours. Your cells become temporarily resistant to insulin. Your stress hormones spike without you even waking up. This is supposed to happen. It's called the dawn phenomenon, and it's been keeping humans alive for millennia. But here's what nobody tells you. There's one habit that hijacks this entire system and turns your nighttime recovery into a metabolic disaster. Most people doing this think they're being healthy. Some even think they're helping their sleep. Studies from the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology found that this single behavior can raise fasting blood sugar by up to 23 points in just 2 weeks. The worst part? You won't feel it happening. No symptoms, no warning signs, just your pancreas slowly burning out while you think everything's fine. We're going to walk through 5 ways this night habit destroys your glucose control, and number 4 is so counterintuitive that even diabetic educators get it wrong. And if you want a head start before we even begin, the first link in the description has something worth checking out. Before we get into what's actually happening, you need to understand why your blood sugar matters even if you're not diabetic. Research from Diabetes Care Journal tracked over 12,000 people for 8 years and found something disturbing. Elevated nighttime glucose accelerates arterial aging by nearly 40%, even when daytime levels stay normal. Your blood vessels don't care about your A1C average. They respond to peaks. Every time glucose spikes beyond a certain threshold, your endothelial cells release inflammatory markers that scar the arterial lining. Do this repeatedly over months and years, and you're essentially sandblasting the inside of your cardiovascular system. The mechanism is simple but brutal. Excess glucose attaches to proteins in your blood through a process called glycation, creating what scientists call advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These AGEs accumulate in your arterial walls, your kidneys, your retinas, your nerve sheaths. They stiffen tissues that need to stay flexible. They trigger chronic inflammation that never fully resolves. A study published in Cell Metabolism showed that participants with normal daytime glucose but elevated nighttime readings had the same vascular damage as pre-diabetics. The body doesn't distinguish between sources of high blood sugar. It only knows the damage is happening. And the habit we're about to discuss weaponizes your body's own nighttime rhythms against you. The first way this destroys your glucose control is by blocking your deepest sleep cycles exactly when your body needs to repair insulin sensitivity. Most people think any sleep is good sleep. Research says otherwise. When you engage in this habit before bed, you prevent your brain from entering slow-wave sleep for the first 3 to 4 hours of the night. Studies from Sleep Medicine Reviews found that losing just 90 minutes of deep sleep reduces insulin sensitivity by 23% the following day. Here's what actually happens. During slow-wave sleep, your body releases growth hormone in rhythmic pulses. This hormone is essential for maintaining lean muscle mass, and muscle tissue is where most of your glucose gets stored after meals. When growth hormone release gets suppressed, your muscles literally become worse at absorbing glucose. At the same time, slow-wave sleep is when your brain clears out beta-amyloid proteins and metabolic waste through the glymphatic system. This drainage process requires low cortisol levels. If cortisol stays elevated because you can't reach deep sleep, the cleanup doesn't happen. You wake up with more inflammatory debris floating in your system, and inflammation directly blocks insulin receptors. A fascinating study from Diabetologia tracked participants wearing continuous glucose monitors and sleep trackers simultaneously. The data was unambiguous. Nights with fragmented deep sleep showed morning glucose spikes averaging 15 to 20 points higher, the nights with uninterrupted slow-wave cycles, even when food intake was identical. If you've ever wondered why your fasting glucose seems random from day to day, this is likely the hidden variable, and this habit guarantees you won't get the deep sleep you need. The second mechanism is even more insidious because it manipulates your circadian clock at the molecular level. Every cell in your body contains clock genes that regulate thousands of metabolic processes on roughly a 24-hour cycle. Your pancreas has its own clock. Your liver has its own clock. Even your fat cells operate on circadian rhythms. These clocks control when insulin gets released, when glucagon activates, when your cells become sensitive or resistant to hormones. Research published in Science showed that these cellular clocks aren't just influenced by light and darkness. They respond to something else, and this night habit sends them completely contradictory signals. When your internal clocks become desynchronized, your pancreas might think it's morning while your liver thinks it's midnight. The result is metabolic chaos. Your liver starts dumping stored glucose into your bloodstream at inappropriate times because its clock says you should be active and burning fuel. Meanwhile, your muscle cells are in nighttime mode, refusing to accept that glucose. So your pancreas pumps out more insulin, trying to force the glucose somewhere, anywhere, and your fat cells happily absorb it, because their insulin receptors are still responsive. This is how people gain visceral belly fat while simultaneously becoming insulin resistant. A study from Current Biology found that circadian disruption increased diabetes risk by 37%, independent of diet, exercise, or body weight. The disruption itself is the problem, and when you do this habit repeatedly, you're essentially giving your cellular clocks conflicting instructions every single night. Your body never fully knows what time it is. Insulin secretion becomes erratic, glucose uptake becomes unpredictable, and over time your pancreatic beta cells exhaust themselves trying to compensate for signals that never make sense. Here's where it gets worse, and this is the part most health information completely misses. This habit triggers something called paradoxical wakefulness, exactly when your body needs to be in its deepest recovery state. Around 2 to 3 in the morning, your core body temperature drops to its lowest point. Your cortisol should be at rock bottom. Your parasympathetic nervous system should dominate. This is when your liver performs most of its detoxification work and when your pancreas recalibrates its insulin production for the coming day. But this night habit activates your sympathetic nervous system in periodic bursts throughout these critical hours. You don't consciously wake up, but your brain shifts into lighter sleep stages. Your heart rate increases slightly, your breathing becomes irregular, and most importantly, your adrenal glands release pulses of cortisol and adrenaline. Research from psychoneuroendocrinology found that even minor nighttime cortisol elevations lasting just 20 to 30 minutes can impair glucose metabolism for up to 16 hours afterward. The mechanism is straightforward. Cortisol signals your liver to release stored glucose because your body thinks it needs energy for some perceived threat. Under normal circumstances, this glucose would fuel a fight-or-flight response, but you're lying in bed, you're not moving. That glucose has nowhere to go, so it just circulates in your bloodstream, elevating your levels throughout the night. When you finally wake up and check your fasting glucose, you're seeing the cumulative effect of these repeated cortisol-driven dumps. A study in diabetes therapy used continuous monitoring to track nighttime glucose patterns and found that people with this habit experienced an average of 4 to 6 unexplained glucose spikes between midnight and 6 a.m., each lasting 30 to 45 minutes. These spikes correlate directly with sympathetic nervous system activation. Your body is essentially running a stress response on repeat all night long, and your blood sugar is paying the price. The fourth mechanism is the one that shocks people because it involves a system most of us think protects us. Your gut microbiome operates on a circadian rhythm just like everything else in your body. Certain bacteria are supposed to be active during the day when you're eating. Others take over at night when your digestive system rests and repairs. These nighttime bacteria produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation. Studies published in Cell Host and Microbe showed that disrupting this bacterial day-night cycle reduces short-chain fatty acid production by up to 60% within 72 hours. When you engage in this night habit, you fundamentally alter which bacteria dominate your gut microbiome. Species that thrive on stress and inflammatory signals proliferate. Beneficial bacteria that produce those crucial fatty acids decline. The shift happens faster than you'd think. Research from Nature Communications found that just 3 consecutive nights of this habit changed gut bacterial composition enough to measurably worsen glucose tolerance. The altered microbiome sends signals through the vagus nerve to your brain, creating what scientists call a vicious cycle. The habit disrupts your microbiome. The disrupted microbiome increases stress signaling. The stress reinforces the habit, and your blood sugar spirals upward. Even more concerning, these bacterial changes affect how you extract energy from food. A disrupted microbiome pulls more calories from the same meals and stores more of those calories as fat rather than burning them. You could eat the exact same diet, but gain weight and raise your blood sugar simply because your gut bacteria are metabolizing food differently. A groundbreaking study in Science Translational Medicine actually transplanted gut bacteria from sleep-deprived humans into germ-free mice. The mice immediately developed insulin resistance despite eating controlled diets. The bacteria alone were enough to transfer the metabolic dysfunction. If you've been doing everything right with your diet and exercise, but your glucose numbers won't budge, your nighttime microbiome disruption could be the missing piece. The fifth and final mechanism is perhaps the most dangerous because it compounds over time in ways you can't reverse. This habit accelerates something called pancreatic beta cell apoptosis, which is just a scientific term for the programmed death of the cells that make your insulin. Your pancreas doesn't have an unlimited supply of these cells. You're born with a certain number, and when they die, they don't regenerate. Research from Diabetologia found that chronic sleep fragmentation increases beta cell death rates by 18%. Here's why this matters more than anything else we've discussed. You can change your diet tomorrow. You can start exercising next week. You can lose weight over the next 6 months. But you cannot bring back dead beta cells. Once they're gone, your insulin-producing capacity is permanently reduced. For years you might not notice because your remaining beta cells compensate by working harder. They pump out more insulin per cell to keep your glucose levels stable, but eventually they can't keep up. This is why type 2 diabetes often seems to appear suddenly, even though the underlying damage took decades to accumulate. Studies using advanced imaging techniques showed that people who later developed diabetes had already lost 40 to 60% of their beta cell mass before their fasting glucose even reached pre-diabetic levels. The cells were dying silently in the background while all their blood tests looked normal. This night habit accelerates that silent death. Every night you do it, you're pushing more beta cells past their stress threshold. The cells that survive become less efficient at sensing glucose and less responsive to the signals that tell them when to release insulin. A study from Diabetes Care put it bluntly. Participants who engaged in this habit for 5 years had beta cell function comparable to people 10 years older. You're essentially aging your pancreas faster than the rest of your body. And unlike skin that wrinkles or joints that ache, you can't see or feel it happening until the damage is severe enough to show up in blood work. So what actually is this habit? It's late-night eating within 3 hours of sleep, that's it. The seemingly innocent snack at 10 p.m. before bed at 11. The dessert at 9:30. The protein shake at 11, thinking you're helping muscle recovery. Research is unequivocal. Eating close to sleep triggers every single mechanism we just discussed. Food intake signals your cellular clocks that it's daytime, desynchronizing them from your sleep-wake cycle. Digestion activates your sympathetic nervous system, fragmenting deep sleep. The glucose and insulin surge right before bed sets up a roller coaster of nighttime spikes and crashes. Your gut microbiome gets confused about when to switch into nighttime repair mode, and your beta cells get hammered with insulin demands exactly when they should be resting and recovering. A massive study in nutrients tracked over 9,000 participants and found that people who ate within 3 hours of sleep had 68% higher risk of developing prediabetes over 6 years compared to those who stopped eating earlier. The effect was independent of total caloric intake, diet quality, or exercise levels. Timing mattered more than content. Your body needs at least 3 to 4 hours between your last bite of food and when you lie down. This window allows insulin levels to drop back to baseline, gives your digestive system time to complete its work, and signals your cellular clocks that nighttime has truly arrived. Studies show that extending this window to 4 or 5 hours produces even better results, with improvements in fasting glucose visible within just 2 weeks. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires deliberate restructuring of your evening routine. Set a firm eating cut-off time based on when you actually go to bed, not when you wish you went to bed. If you're in bed by 10:30, stop eating by 7. If you need a later schedule, adjust accordingly, but protect that 3-hour minimum window. Research from obesity found that participants who established consistent eating cutoffs reduced their nighttime glucose excursions by an average of 19 points within 30 days. Handle evening hunger strategically. That hunger you feel at 9 or 10 p.m. isn't usually physical. Studies on appetite regulation show it's often habitual, stress-driven, or triggered by evening screen time stimulating appetite centers in your brain. When hunger hits after your cutoff, try hot herbal tea, sparkling water, or simply acknowledging the sensation without reacting. The hunger will pass within 15 to 20 minutes. If you genuinely need evening calories because of intense training or physical work, front-load them earlier in the evening and make them primarily protein and fat rather than carbohydrates. These macronutrients have minimal impact on insulin and won't trigger the same circadian disruption. A study in Cell Metabolism showed that a high-protein evening meal at 6 p.m. produced completely different metabolic effects than the same meal at 9 p.m. Timing changed everything for people who work night shifts or have unavoidable late schedules. The principle remains the same. Create separation between your last food intake and your sleep period, whenever that sleep occurs. Your circadian system is adaptable, but it needs consistency and clear signals. Let's recap what we've covered, because every single point deserves to stay with you. 1. Late-night eating blocks. The deep sleep your body needs to maintain insulin sensitivity, causing measurable glucose dysfunction the very next day. 2. Eating close to bedtime sends contradictory signals to your cellular clocks, desynchronizing your entire metabolic system and creating chaos in how your body processes glucose. 3. Nighttime food intake triggers paradoxical stress responses in the middle of the night, spiking cortisol and dumping glucose into your bloodstream while you sleep. 4. Disrupting your gut bacteria's circadian rhythm reduces production of the compounds that keep you insulin sensitive and fundamentally changes how you metabolize food. 5. Chronic late eating accelerates the death of your insulin-producing beta cells, damage that accumulates silently for years until it becomes irreversible. If your fasting glucose has been creeping upward despite everything else you're doing right, this habit is likely the hidden saboteur. If you feel tired despite sleeping enough hours, this metabolic disruption is probably fragmenting your sleep quality. If you're gaining weight around your midsection no matter how clean you eat, your circadian desynchronization is probably directing calories straight to visceral fat storage. Everything covered here pairs with what's waiting in the first link of the description. Take a look when you're done. Your nighttime habits determine your daytime metabolism more than most people realize. Protect those final hours before sleep like your life depends on it, because your pancreas certainly does.